The research team went quiet when the AI returned its conclusion. Not skeptical, not immediately dismissive. Quiet in the specific way that happens when a result arrives that is too precise to be noise and too uncomfortable to accept without sitting with it for a while. They had fed the system decades of accumulated research. Every excavation report, every geological survey, every astronomical alignment calculation, every acoustic study, every engineering reconstruction, thousands of data points gathered over generations of scholarly work, processed together for the first time in a single integrated analysis. The conclusion the AI reached was not one that any individual researcher had proposed, though pieces of it had appeared in scattered form across the literature for years. Assembled together and modeled as a unified system, the picture that emerged was something different from every mainstream explanation Stonehenge had ever attracted. Not a temple, not a calendar, not a burial site, a healing center, or a gathering place for seasonal ritual. A machine, a structure engineered with measurable precision to produce a specific and repeatable effect on the human beings inside it. And the effect it was built to produce, when fully modeled, is what made the team go quiet. For 5,000 years, we have been standing inside a device without understanding what it was doing to us. The data, assembled by a system that could see patterns across a scale no individual human researcher could hold in mind simultaneously, suggests we have been significantly wrong about what Stonehenge is for. Before we get into what the AI found and why it matters, here is the question worth holding from the beginning. What does it change about a monument when you discover that its primary function was not symbolic but operational? What the stones can actually do. The first component of the AI's conclusion drew on acoustic research that had been conducted independently by multiple teams over the preceding decade, but which had never been integrated into a unified model of the site's function. In 2020, acoustical engineer Trevor Cox and his team at the University of Salford conducted what was then the most comprehensive acoustic study of Stonehenge ever attempted. Working with a precisely scaled replica built using three-dimensional printed stones, arranged in exact correspondence to the original monument, they ran hundreds of tests across the full audible frequency spectrum. The results were sufficiently unexpected that they required careful explanation to distinguish genuine findings from the kind of acoustic quirks that appear in any enclosed stone space. Inside the stone circle, human voices projected with a quality that had no equivalent in the acoustic environment of daily Neolithic life. Sound was fuller, more resonant, and more enveloping than anything a person living 5,000 years ago would normally experience. Drums generated vibrations that appeared to come from multiple directions simultaneously, rather than from a single point of origin. The effect was immersive in a way that open-air or cave environments cannot replicate. The finding that stopped Cox's team was not the enhancement of sound, but the elimination of echo. Despite the substantial stone surfaces surrounding the interior space, sharp sound reflections were absent. The inner stones disrupted incoming sound waves from the outer ring in a manner that prevented the formation of the discrete reflections that any large stone enclosure would normally produce. You do not achieve this effect by accident. Eliminating echo from a stone circle requires understanding how sound waves interact with surfaces at specific angles and specific distances, and arranging those surfaces accordingly. Rupert Till at the University of Huddersfield extended this work by examining the Welsh bluestones specifically. He found that certain bluestones produce a distinctive metallic ringing tone when struck, a property that gives the region they come from its traditional Welsh name, which translates roughly as ringing rocks. The Neolithic builders selected these stones from that specific region, which means they were aware of this acoustic property before the stones were transported. Till's work also identified something in a lower frequency range, below what the human ear processes as sound, but within the range that the body registers as physical sensation. Infrasound, the technical term for these low-frequency vibrations, is well documented in the scientific literature for its measurable effects on human psychology. Research on infrasound exposure has consistently shown that it produces feelings of unease, a heightened sense of presence in a space where no visible source of that presence exists, elevated emotional suggestibility, and states of anxiety or awe that subjects find difficult to attribute to any identifiable cause. The AI's analysis of these combined acoustic findings produced a conclusion that the research team found genuinely disturbing in its specificity. The acoustic properties of Stonehenge, taken together, are not incidental to the structure's design. They are precisely what the design was optimized to produce. The arrangement of the stones creates a specific and engineered psychological environment: enhanced perception of sound, elimination of echo, production of infrasound, and the resulting emotional states that infrasound reliably induces. Think about what that means when you apply it to the experience of someone arriving at this site 5,000 years ago. They have traveled for days or weeks. They have heard about this place their entire lives, in the way that people talk about things they have never seen, but believe absolutely. They arrive at the moment the stones rise against the sky. They enter the circle. And then something begins to happen to them that they have no framework for understanding, that their bodies are registering as the presence of something enormous and non-human. The stones are doing that to them. Physics is doing it, and the people who built the structure understood how. The impossible provenance of the altar stone. The acoustic findings were the first component of the AI's conclusion. The geological findings were the one that produced an equally significant revision to the standard account of how Stonehenge was built and by whom. The basic transportation problem of Stonehenge has been known for generations. The Welsh bluestones, weighing between 2 and 5 tons each, came from the Preseli Hills in southwest Wales, roughly 150 miles from the site. The larger sarsen stones, each weighing up to 25 tons, originated from Marlborough Downs, approximately 25 miles north. Both of these sourcing decisions had been confirmed by earlier geological analysis, and both raised serious questions about the logistical capabilities of Neolithic people, though various proposed solutions involving sledges, rafts, and large labor forces had made the transportation at least theoretically possible. What the AI identified, by processing geochemical data across the entire dataset, was something that human researchers had not followed through to its full implication: the altar stone, one of the structurally and ceremonially central elements of the monument, does not match any geological source in Wales or southern England. Its mineral composition is unique among the Stonehenge materials. In late 2024, a research team led by Anthony Clark at Curtin University confirmed this finding through high-precision mass spectrometry analysis of mineral grains preserved within altar stone fragments. The geological fingerprint of those grains, including specific mineral ratios and age signatures ranging from around 450 million years to nearly 2 billion years old, corresponds to only one formation on the British Isles, the Orcadian Basin in northeastern Scotland. The distance from that location to Stonehenge is approximately 600 miles, moving a 6-ton block across 600 miles of British terrain using technology available 5,000 years ago by overland route would require an undertaking of extraordinary logistical complexity across terrain that ranges from rugged highland to tidal estuary. Professor Chris Kirkland, one of the researchers involved in the confirmation study, stated plainly that the most plausible transport mechanism was maritime, guiding the stone along the coastline using boats, exploiting tidal currents, and navigating hundreds of kilometers of open water and coastal passage. The implication of that conclusion is not simply logistical. It describes a Neolithic civilization with trade or tribute networks extending the full length of the British Isles, with maritime navigation capability sufficient to transport multi-ton cargo over open water, and with access to geological knowledge specific enough to identify a particular sandstone formation in Scotland, because of properties that would only matter if the builders understood what those properties contributed to the monument's function. These were not scattered tribes who happened to share a large construction project. This was an organized civilization with the knowledge, the coordination, and the reach to source materials from 600 miles away for reasons the AI's analysis suggests were highly specific. The bluestones for their acoustic properties, the sarsens for their structural density, the Scottish sandstone for reasons the current data can confirm as deliberate but cannot yet fully explain. What do you think it tells us about Neolithic society that they were selecting specific rocks from specific regions based on properties we are only now scientifically documenting? The mainstream narrative of prehistory has consistently underestimated the technical sophistication of the people who built Stonehenge. The geological findings make that underestimation increasingly difficult to sustain. The alignment that points at nothing. The solar alignments of Stonehenge are the aspect of the monument that most people know. The summer solstice sunrise through the heel stone. The winter solstice sunset framing the great trilithon. These alignments are real, they are precise, and they are the reason thousands of people gather at the site twice a year to watch the sun perform its ancient relationship with the stones. The AI confirmed these alignments. It also found something else. When the system cross-referenced the precise placement of every stone against reconstructed star maps calculated for the sky as it appeared 5,000 years ago, it identified a second alignment pattern, far subtler than the solar events and not previously recognized as intentional because no researcher had assembled the full dataset in a form that made the pattern legible. Dr. Giulio Magli, an archaeoastronomer at the Politecnico di Milano, with decades of experience analyzing ancient monument alignments, reviewed the AI's methodology and confirmed the celestial geometry the system had identified. The alignment points at an empty region of the night sky, not at a star, not at a planet's orbital path, not at any celestial feature that would have been visible to Neolithic observers. A mathematically precise orientation toward a patch of darkness where nothing currently exists. The AI calculated with high statistical confidence that this orientation was not the result of approximation or coincidence. The precision required to achieve it is comparable to the precision of the solar alignments, which everyone agrees were intentional. The builders hauled stones from Scotland. They selected rocks with acoustic ringing properties from Wales. They engineered a structure that eliminates echo and produces infrasound. And then they aimed the entire construction at a location in the sky where nothing is. The most straightforward interpretation of this finding, within the framework of archaeoastronomy, is that the builders were tracking something that is not currently at that position, either something that was there when construction began 5,000 years ago and has since moved due to the precession of the Earth's axis, or something expected to arrive at that coordinates at a future point that the monument's designers were calculating toward. The precession explanation requires working backward through 5,000 years of axial wobble to determine what was at that position when Stonehenge was being designed. The forward-looking explanation requires entertaining the possibility that the builders were not recording what they saw, but anticipating what they predicted. Both possibilities are scientifically interesting. The second is the one the research team found harder to set aside after the full analysis was complete. What is it in that patch of darkness that Stonehenge is pointed at? Is the alignment backward-looking, a record of something significant in the sky 5,000 years ago that has since moved? Or is it forward-looking, a marker aimed at something the builders calculated would eventually arrive at that position? The data establishes the deliberateness of the alignment. What the alignment means is a question the data alone does not resolve. The power structure that built it. The romantic interpretation of Stonehenge as a monument of communal effort, separate tribes coming together in a spirit of shared purpose to build something that represented their collective identity, is one of the most persistent narratives in popular archaeology. It is also the one the AI's analysis most directly contradicts. The mathematics of construction do not support the cooperative model. Building Stonehenge to the precision the structure actually demonstrates, sustained across a period of several centuries during which the design was elaborated and refined, requires a form of organizational continuity that scattered cooperative tribes cannot maintain. Construction standards must be transmitted across generations. Labor must be directed toward a unified long-term plan. Resources must be extracted from multiple geographic regions and transported to a single site under consistent authority. The AI's analysis of the logistical requirements produced an estimate of thousands of laborers operating across multiple generations. The stones from Wales, Marlborough, and Scotland did not arrive as cooperative gifts from allied communities. The geological sourcing data, combined with the transportation logistics, describes a system of extraction rather than exchange. Communities at those locations were providing resources to a central authority that had the power to demand them. What the overall data portrait describes is a society organized around a concentrated elite whose authority rested on a specific form of knowledge. The ability to understand and manipulate the intersection of astronomy, geology, acoustics, and human psychology in ways that the general population could not access or evaluate independently. This is not an unusual organizational structure in the study of complex societies. It is, in fact, a fairly standard description of how specialized knowledge functions as the basis for hierarchical authority. There is no evidence from this period in the British Isles of large-scale organized warfare, no fortifications, no battlefields, no mass burial events attributable to violent conflict. The absence of coercive force in the archaeological record has often been cited as evidence of peaceful social organization. The AI's analysis suggests an alternative explanation, a society where coercive force was not necessary because control operated through a different mechanism entirely. Control over what people believed, control over what people feared, control over the physical environment where belief and fear were produced. The structure that induces infrasound, eliminates echo, and makes human voices sound as though they emanate from the stones themselves is not a neutral meeting place. It is an environment specifically engineered to make ordinary people feel that they are in the presence of something they cannot control or understand. In a society where that experience was the primary basis for authority, the people who controlled the environment that produced the experience controlled everything else. Does that reframe how you think about the monument? Not a gathering place, but a device. Not a shared project, but an instrument of power so effective that it required neither armies nor fortifications, because the people who entered it came out believing whatever they were told while inside. The 2024 lunar standstill. And the machine still running. In 2024, the Earth experienced what astronomers call a major lunar standstill. This is a genuine astronomical event that occurs approximately every 18.5 years, when the Moon reaches its most extreme positions on the horizon during its monthly cycle, rising and setting at points significantly further north and south than it occupies for most of its cycle. During this relatively brief period, the Moon's path traces its widest possible arc across the sky. Researchers studying Stonehenge had long suspected that the monument tracked this event. The geometry of the monument's layout, specifically the alignment of the 4 outer station stones that define a rectangle within the main circle, creates sightlines that correspond to both the summer solstice sunrise and the moonrise at major lunar standstill. The combination of solar and lunar tracking in a single structure's geometry is not incidental. It requires understanding the relationship between the two cycles, which involves observing both over extended periods and building a mathematical framework that connects them. When the major lunar standstill of 2024 arrived, researchers positioned at Stonehenge to observe it confirmed what the geometry predicted. The stones responded to the Moon's position precisely as the design required. Not approximately, precisely. Accounting for 5,000 years of subtle atmospheric change, accumulation of settlement in the surrounding landscape, and the partial deterioration of the original stone arrangement, the alignment held. The machine still worked. That fact is worth pausing on. A structure that was designed 50 centuries ago by people working without written mathematics or surveying instruments as we understand them, without the ability to store calculations across generations in any form other than oral tradition and physical construction, continues to perform the celestial tracking function it was built for, with sufficient precision to be verified by contemporary astronomical measurement. The standard explanation for the solstice alignments has always been that the builders were marking the seasons for agricultural purposes, telling a farming community when to plant and when to harvest. That explanation is plausible as far as it goes. But when you integrate the acoustic engineering, the precision material sourcing from Scotland, the absence of echo, the infrasound production, and the secondary alignment toward an empty sky, the agricultural calendar explanation starts to feel like a description of only the most visible and least interesting function of what the structure was actually doing. A device this precise, requiring this much labor and knowledge to build, aimed partly at something in the sky that is not there yet, maintained with enough accuracy to still be measurable 5,000 years later. This was not built to tell farmers when to plant barley. It was built to do something more specific, something that the people who built it considered important enough to invest centuries of sustained effort in achieving. The question, the empty sky leaves open. The convergence of findings that the AI produced from the Stonehenge dataset describes a monument that is more precisely engineered, more deliberately complex, and more operationally sophisticated than any mainstream account of its origin has previously proposed. The acoustic properties are measurable. The geological sourcing is confirmed. The astronomical alignments are geometrically precise. The organizational capacity required to build it implies a centralized authority with a long-term plan. None of these findings individually requires extraordinary explanation. Each one has been documented in the scholarly literature. What the AI contributed was the integration of all of them into a unified model, and the unified model produces a picture that is considerably more unsettling than any single finding in isolation. A structure built to alter the psychological state of people inside it. Materials sourced from 600 miles away, for properties the builders understood before transport. An echo-free acoustic environment that no comparable structure accidentally produces. An alignment pointed with deliberate precision at a region of sky where nothing currently resides. The acoustic findings tell us what the structure was doing to the people inside it. The geological findings tell us how far the builders' knowledge and reach extended. The astronomical findings tell us that the builders were tracking something with a long-term orientation that extends beyond any individual human lifetime, or even any single generation. The organizational findings tell us about the concentration of power that made the entire project possible. What they do not tell us, at least not yet, is what the empty sky is pointing at. Precession of the Earth's axis is a well-understood phenomenon. Working backward through 5,000 years of precession would identify what celestial feature occupied that position when the alignment was designed. That calculation has been run. The results are one of the findings the research team has been most cautious about discussing publicly. Working forward through precession identifies when something might arrive at that position in the future. That calculation has also been run. The results are even more carefully handled. Here is what the data does allow us to say with confidence. The builders of Stonehenge understood things about astronomy, geology, acoustics, and human psychology that we have only recently developed the scientific tools to document. They encoded that understanding into a physical structure that has remained sufficiently intact to be analyzed 5,000 years after construction began. They aimed that structure at something in the sky with a precision that matches their solar alignments. And they maintained the knowledge required to sustain and refine that project across multiple generations of construction. Whatever they were counting toward, they considered it important enough to build a machine for. And the machine still works. What do you think the empty alignment is pointed at? Is it tracking something that was there 5,000 years ago and has moved? Or is it oriented towards something the builders expected would eventually arrive? The distinction between those two possibilities is not merely astronomical. It changes what kind of civilization built Stonehenge and what they understood about time. Share your thinking in the comments. This is the kind of question where the range of perspectives genuinely matters, because no single researcher holds all the relevant knowledge, and the conversation between different ways of approaching the question is where the most interesting thinking is happening. The stones have been waiting 5,000 years for someone to ask the right question. We may finally have the tools to hear what they have been saying.